It has a high perfusion rate of blood, and it also is a calcifying tissue like the teeth and the bones. And so this researcher hypothesized that fluoride will be attracted to this tissue, this little gland, like a magnet. And sure enough, when she investigated, the average level of fluoride on these little calcium hydroxyapatite crystals was 9,000 parts per million, up to 21,000 parts per million, which means that this little gland has a higher concentration of fluoride than any other tissue in the body, including the bone. This researcher, Jennifer Luke, also did animal studies, and in the animal studies, she found that fluoride lowered the production of melatonin, the hormone that this little gland makes, and incidentally, it only makes it at night, the hormone of darkness. This pineal gland reacts to light. Descartes called it the seat of the soul. Not only did it lower melatonin levels in these animals, but also shorten the time to puberty, which is absolutely consistent. Melatonin is thought to act like a biological clock, involved with timing of puberty, timing of aging, timing of jet lag and sleeping patterns and so on. Controls all kinds of things. And what they think happens that with the child, at birth, the melatonin levels are high, and with childhood, they gradually lower, and at a certain point, the lowered melatonin levels trigger the production of the sex hormones, leading to puberty. Ironically, that first study that was published, which I already referred to in the bones, also recorded that the young girls in the fluoridated community, Newburgh, were menstruating on average 5 months earlier than the young girls in the non-fluoridated community. Now, they didn't think that was significant at the time. Now, with Jennifer Luke's work, it is clearly takes on a new perspective. Kids now are reaching puberty 7, 8, 9. It has people very, very worried. But once again, the fluoridating countries have made absolutely no effort to reproduce Jennifer Luke's work. It is not difficult. They could have done it easily. The Department of Health and Human Services has adopted to this, quote, sacred policy of fluoridation is to deny, critique the methodologies, but don't attempt to reproduce the studies. If you don't look, you don't find. And they're using the absence of study as if it was the same as the absence of harm, which is absolutely ridiculous, utterly irresponsible. So now they're giving every indication, particularly the Center of Disease Control that avidly promotes fluoridation around the United States, and around the world for that matter. The impression that they give is that it's more important now to protect this practice than to protect the health of the American people and our babies and our children. It's almost as if the teeth have become the most important tissue, the most important organ in the body, instead of our brains, instead of our thyroid glands, instead of our pineal glands, instead of our kidneys.
Well, a truly amazing boil down of the highlights of our interview we did that's over an hour long with Dr. Paul Conant. The full interview is posted here at prisonplanet.tv as well. We're going to go to break and come back in studio with the one, the only, the Health Ranger, Mike Adams. Stay with us.
Obama is notoriously a liar.
We need to go to where the real architecture of government is, and it's not in a president.
Wall Street has hijacked Washington in broad daylight.
Well, Obama's already fudging. He's fudged since day one in this election.
The elite are using Obama to pacify the public so they can usher in the North American Union by stealth, launch a new Cold War, and continue the occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan.
The globalists are outside all the nations. That gives them safety, and they play countries off against each other.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see. Partnership and cooperation among nations is not a choice. It is the only way.
What they're doing is using the existence of the United States to act out their Wall Street fantasies of world domination and maintaining their capital structures and maintaining their system of looting.
The fight that this country has been waging since its inception is for the central bankers not to take over the country.
President Barack Obama is only the tool of a larger agenda.
Senator Obama had a desire to do some meetings. Others had a desire to meet with him tonight in a private way, and that's what we're doing.
Presidential candidate Barack Obama was publicly criticizing the North American Free Trade Agreement in a bid for votes, but privately telling Canadian officials not to worry about it.
If you talk to our generals, they are desperate for is a civilian counterpart to our military force.
What do you call this thing where you get this false sense of gratification, but because a black man is in office, everything's gonna be all right? No, everything's not gonna be all right.
So I know how unpopular it is to be seen as helping banks right now, especially when everyone is suffering in part from their bad decisions. I promise you, I get it.
The Obama deception. The truth strikes back. Get your copy of The Obama Deception today at Infowars.com or download it in super high quality at PrisonPlanet.tv.
We are back. It's InfoWars Nightly News on this September 29th, 2011, Thursday edition. And we've got such an incredible amount of health freedom news right now that I wanted to get Mike Adams of naturalnews.com, the health ranger, here in studio to recap the incredible last few days. Their confirmed report with the letter from the Department of Health and Human Services calling up, basically harassing people, asking them if they've had their shots. We've got a judge in Wisconsin ruling that you can't grow your own food or have your own cow for your own milk, saying the police power won't allow that. Just incredible. And we have other things happening. Like Chuck Norris coming out and saying GMO is dangerous, it should be labeled, and the reason that's important is he's seen as kind of a right-wing figure, and they tried to make it left-wing environmental stuff, right-wing, other issues. The point is, this affects everybody, and I've noticed that the environmentalists, I want to cover the Chuck Norris thing first with you, Mike. The system is great at controlling the cancer associations to never look at all the real cures and treatments. Or they're really great at having government institutions and groups that look at missing children. And then you find out that's so DynCorp and Halliburton and the UN can actually run the kidnapped kids and not get in trouble. So the criminals tend to try to lead the resistance to themselves. And they try to make it a liberal conservative issue. They have the environmentalists going after carbon dioxide that plants live off of, and that is 0.0360% of the atmosphere, and is very low right now. But then they want to ignore toxic waste dumping, Fukushima exploding like 100 Hiroshimas or Nagasaki's. I mean, the biggest nuclear disaster in history. They don't want to focus on GMO. We are biological creatures that were developed on this planet through a process, and now we're not supposed to even debate hundreds of companies randomly splicing everything, and in all the studies of the GMO, it's causing sterilization in the rodents. All the health problems that mirror that happening in our populations. And that's why I wanted to raise this point first, because Mayor Bloomberg came out today, this is Cyber News Service, and said, quote, government's highest duty is to push healthy foods, but he wants to arrest you if you have too much salt in your restaurant in New York or too much fat. But see, that's a red herring. Sure, those things probably aren't good. It's, the government's going to protect you from things, but we say GMOs and vaccines are good. So again, they're trying to lead the opposition, and this is a central point for me that's really key to understanding how they co-opt reasonable environmentalism turned into a carbon tax, or they co-opt concerns about really unhealthy food we're being fed, and they're actually got us distracted off into fats or salt, when that's nothing compared to GMO and additives. So here is the expert to talk about that, Mike Adams, here in studio. Mike, great to have you.
Alex, good to be here.
Let's cover this piece first.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up this piece, because this issue in particular we've got to expose the idea that it's completely a false paradigm that the government should be telling you what to eat in the first place. We've got to get the government out of the way of these processed foods and to stop subsidizing corn syrup, for example, stop subsidizing sugar. What we've got to do is get the government to enable food freedom, so that we can actually choose the kinds of foods that we want to consume, whether it's raw milk or GMO-free foods, or have honest labeling on those foods so that we're not buying GMOs. What Bloomberg is saying is that the government should be telling us what to eat and what not to eat. And if that happens, we're going to get a distorted message that is hijacked by industry, and we're going to end up with very unhealthy processed dead foods rather than healthy foods anyway. So Bloomberg is wrong on this count. We got to get back to freedom and liberty about foods, not government telling us what to eat.
Mike, Chuck Norris is making the point that we at least have a right to have GMO label, but government, whether it's salmon that's been crossed with insects or whatever the case is, they don't want us to have a right to know if milk has growth hormone in it. Obviously, Big Pharma that's created this modern Frankensteinian type system, they know what they're doing. But from your research, what is GMO doing to people? I mean, looking out there to TV land, tell folks what's in the GMO.
Well, GMO is just based on a pack of lies. I mean, number one, they say GMOs have higher yields. They don't. That's a complete fabrication. Number two, they say that GMOs are safe for consumption, and yet all the studies consistently show that GMOs have very dangerous and undesirable side effects, including potentially widespread infertility. You know, the fact that the Bt genes in the corn can theoretically then interact with the genetic code of the bacteria in your own gut, it can turn you into a pesticide factory where you're actually producing pesticide chemicals in your own body. And from that, it's no wonder that people might have chronic fatigue. It's no wonder they might have immune suppression. I mean, people often, they wonder, why do I feel so sick, or why do I feel so tired? GMOs could be a very key part of that answer. But ultimately, Alex, this is about it's a campaign of ignorance that the industry is trying to push on the American people, to say that you don't have the right to know you're eating GMOs. The FDA and the USDA, they don't want them labeled. They don't want you to be able to read a label and say, oh, is there GMO in this food or not? And even Whole Foods has not taken, in my opinion, enough of a stand to say we're going to eliminate GMOs from our stores. But I think this is going to change, Alex. I know there's some good news coming up next week. I think there are going to be more grassroots efforts to let people know that we demand honest labeling of GMOs so that we can make a choice, Alex.
And they've also capitulated at Whole Foods, where I like to shop. They, a few months ago, put a sign up, as you know, saying there's so much GMO, even in so-called organic now, we can no longer say that we're GMO free. And you just brought up the fact that this can make microorganisms that produce pesticide. The public may not know that Bt, that's being engineered into a lot of different plants, corn and other things, grows its own pesticide pharmacologically so that bugs can't eat it. Now, honeybees are like humans. They'll go ahead and still get the pollen, and that's one thing in German studies has been linked to part of the cocktail of reasons, as you know, they're dying. So right there, I mean, just backing up what you were saying, that we're getting chronic bowel problems exploding, cancer exploding. I mean, if you look at the countries with the GMO, they also have the highest vaccination. North America, New Zealand, Australia, highest cancer rates. You can follow these maps, and you can see that what's happening in the lab animals is also happening with humans. The problem is you can test the life cycle of a rat in a year or so. With humans, it takes 20, 30, 40, 50 years just to see generationally what's happening, but we're already in the first generation mirroring the reduced fertility, the increased cancer in the first generation. But as you know, by the third generation of these major studies that multiple governments and institutions have done, by third generation, rats, guinea pigs, mice, near total sterilization, all sorts of mutations. My God, I mean, this is incredible.
Yeah, it's like we are living out a ticking time bomb, a multi-generational time bomb. And there's even more to it than what you just said, Alex. Remember that these biotech companies are running experiments with injecting crops with genes to grow vaccines. So if they take this to the next logical step, which they do because they always push it too far when they're playing God with seeds, they could have you start eating your vaccine corn.
Well, like Bill Gates says a decade ago, that's the plan, is to have